So welcome back, everyone. I'll reiterate the thank you for coming. It's a very hot day. I live down in Somerset, and I think I'd rather be sitting underneath the apple tree in my garden than being on the tube. So I appreciate everybody being here. My name is Andy Ginn. I work for the consulting arm of Hewlett-Packard Enterprise Pointnext. You may not know the name Pointnext. This is the new name for our services division. You'll probably see quite a lot of marketing about it over the next few months. So I won't say any more about that because that's not what I'm here to talk about today. But that's who I am. I'm the SharePoint technical lead for the UK and Ireland. And what I'm here to do today is to talk to you about a project that we've got going on currently in flight for the Ministry of Defence. Now, given the nature of this program, there's a lot I can tell you about it. It is in the public domain. There's a press release about it. You've got some URLs there. But hopefully you'll appreciate there are some things that I can't tell you about. So feel free to ask me questions, and I will politely decline to answer any which I don't think are appropriate. So the challenge, the Ministry of Defence has 200,000 users, has 120 terabytes of data. It has data centers scattered all over the UK and around the world. We have multiple data sources, SharePoint 2007, file shares, Meridio, various other things. And the Ministry of Defence wants to move to SharePoint Online, OneDrive for Business, and HPE Records Manager. They only made the decision that Office 365 was the right solution for them when the UK based implementation of Office 365 was put into place. So within the UK itself, there are 3 data centers, I'm not going to tell you where they are, which host Office 365. It's now hosted by DXC, which was part of Hewlett-Packard Enterprise until about 2 months ago. So DXC run the data centers on Microsoft's behalf, but the Office 365 implementation in those data centers is absolutely standard. Microsoft runs the service themselves. If you're interested, and I actually haven't updated my slide deck to show it's Microsoft and DXC, not Microsoft and HPE. If you're interested in Office 365 in the UK, there is a link there to a lot more information. But what you can guarantee is that the data never leaves these shores. So what is it that we're doing? Well, as I said, we have SharePoint 2007, we have a lot of file shares, and we have a lot of records. And we're migrating those over to either SharePoint Online, OneDrive for Business, or the HPE Records Management software package. In a very similar way to the theory that Richard just gave you, we did the discovery, the analysis, the preparation and scheduling, and then the migrate themselves. This program is in flight. We've actually been working on it for about 18 months. Actually, I'm almost on my 2nd anniversary. So the initial discussions with the Ministry of Defence started 2 years ago this month. So it took us quite a long time to figure out actually what it was that they needed, how to actually do the migration, what data should go where before we actually really started the real work, turning the handle of doing these migrates. So today I'm going to concentrate down onto SharePoint Online and OneDrive for Business. I'm happy to talk about the record side of things, but that's not for today. What did we have to do? The first thing is to look at the tenant itself. So what is it that we're trying to achieve? How do we configure the tenant to accept the information that we're going to give it? What customizations are required? How do we provision it? How do we get the provisioning of the OneDrive ready for the users as they arrive? And how do we test it? We wanted to make sure that we have as minimal configuration as possible, as minimal changes to the user experience as possible. We needed to make sure that we provisioned in a timely fashion. So we worked with the MOD to figure out the schedule for the users, and we work on this on a regular basis. So this is not just a question of moving data. If it was just moving data, it would be easy. If you're trying to move 200,000 users from SharePoint 2007 to SharePoint Online, there's a huge amount of education that you need to do. There's a huge amount of communication that you need to think about. There's a huge amount of preparation. What is an acceptable level of change? This is an organization that we cannot disrupt. It's got to, users go home at 5 o'clock on one night, they come in the following morning, they're suddenly using Office 365. They have to be prepared for it. So during the working of the configuration and the customization of the tenant, we worked very closely with the user experience people to make sure that we could get the new information architecture, the new user experience all lined up so we understood how to move the data. One of the other challenges that not only the Ministry of Defence but virtually every UK government department has is that a couple of years ago the UK government decided to change data classification. So in the old systems it's unclassified, restricted, confidential, secret, top secret. In the new systems it's unclassified, official, sensitive, secret, top secret, and there's not a direct mapping between those old and new. So we had to figure out how to do the transformation of the data as we moved it across. We also had to make sure that none of the confidential data in the old system suddenly became secret, because this system can only take up to official sensitive. If it's secret data, it needs to move into an on-prem equivalent. And that's all I'm going to say about that. So looking at the source environment, as I said, we've got SharePoint 2007, we've got file shares. Okay, that's easy, isn't it? Actually, what we've got are a large number of SharePoint 2007 farms scattered across the country, scattered across the globe. We also have a large number of file shares scattered across the country, scattered across the globe. They have differing network connections, differing patch levels, differing user bases. So we had to consider actually what's in there. So before we could even take the AvePoint software and install it in the source, we actually had to assess all of these environments to ensure that we understood what was there. Could we actually install the software on the production environment? A lot of these environments are actually run by other companies, so we had to talk to them about their SLAs. What happens if we rock up with a DVD, we install the software on there, and for some reason we invalidate the SLA? So we had to work with those third-party suppliers, we had to work with the Ministry of Defence itself, we had to work with the network companies to understand what all these different environments were before we could actually install the software. We install it, configure it, and the configuration allows us to do the discovery and the analysis of the source environments to make sure that we understand what's in there, what's going to move, what's old, what's not required, what becomes secret. We're not just going to lift and shift all this stuff. So we've configured the AvePoint software to do that discovery and analysis, and we do some measurements and we do some tests. And we have to ensure that when we're actually doing the measurement, so one of the reasons we're doing the testing, one of the many reasons, is to ensure that, again, we're not invalidating any of the SLAs, we're not degrading the performance of SharePoint 2007 whilst we're actually doing this migration. The organisation has to carry on working. We are not allowed any downtime at all in these environments. So there was a lot of assessment, a lot of configuration, a lot of measurement and testing to ensure that we could do what we needed to do. There's a lot of supporting environments. The networks, they've got networks all over the place, obviously. These source farms are all over the place. They're all connected through to a demilitarized zone and a staging area inside our own data centers so we can move the data through in a secure way and then out into Office 365. So not only the SharePoint side of things, we are the most important people in the project, obviously, but there are exchange moves going on. They're putting in Skype for Business with video. There's a lot of impact on the networks. So we had to assess and think about the impact that we were going to have on the existing networks and how to configure the new networks to make sure that the throughput was required. I don't know if anybody's Star Trek fans here. I love Star Trek. I don't know if you remember when Captain Kirk opened the locker and all the tribbles fell on his head. That's what we did not want to have in this project. So we had to have a completely controlled way of opening that locker to let the tribbles out in a little at a time. So the networks are absolutely fundamental to making sure that we and the Exchange team and the Skype for Business team all work together, and that the users can continue to access the source environments while we were doing the work. We had to work with the Active Directory guys. This is one of the areas that I'm not going to talk too much about because there's a transformation of the source users to the new domains, the new security classifications, and the way that the users will access the data. So we had to work very closely with the Active Directory people to understand the design in the new environment and how we can map the old to the new. And the Exchange guys, we work very closely with them because they are moving massive amounts of data very, very quickly, and we had to make sure that the two teams didn't get in each other's way. Then, very importantly, we have the users. So these people are looking after us. They have an absolutely vital job to do. They need to go home at 5 o'clock working in one way, and they need to come back working in another way. So one of the things that the MOD said to us right at the beginning of the program is, how quickly can we do this? And we said, well, we can actually do it very quickly, but how are you going to educate and make sure that those 200,000 users know what they're doing, they understand the impacts to their ways of working, and that you can absorb any of the questions that are coming back? So rather than doing it as quickly as we possibly physically could, we came up with a plan for lots of early adopters across the organisation, across the various divisions, so the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the central systems, all the different parts of the organisation. We identified those users who were both willing and able to be early adopters, and we communicated with them. And we communicated more, and we communicated more, and more and more. We have this communication stream going on all the time. As users, especially the early adopters, started using the service, we took a lot of feedback from them. And that fed back into the configuration, the customization, and the provisioning of the tenant of SharePoint Online and OneDrive for Business. So this is not a unfortunate expression in this project. It's not a fire and forget. It's a cyclical thing. We have to keep feeding back to make sure that our configurations and customizations and our communications all work. That could have a knock-on effect again into the supporting environments. So we have to make sure that we have all of these communications internally, both the technical team and for the end users as well. Does that make sense? Then, scheduling of jobs. So we have tens of thousands of SharePoint sites. We have hundreds of thousands of users. We have terabytes of data in file shares which we're transforming on the fly. And we're only allowed to do this work out of hours. So we have Monday to Thursday windows. We can't migrate at all on Fridays. And then Saturday morning to Monday morning, one big job, for one big block of time for the very big migrates. So if you can imagine, we have all of those different moving parts, and we have to figure out how to actually get that to work. And then we have to give that schedule back to the users. So what we have in HPE PointNext is a scheduling tool. And we can feed all of those different parameters into the tool. And it works out, given the sizes, so the information that's come out of the assessment of the source, we know the size of all the bits that we're trying to move. We've got the windows. And what that scheduling tool can do is then figure out how all of those bits fit together, and it comes out with a schedule across about 14 months. We then feed that back to the users, and we say, we're planning to move your piece of data on this night to this location. And inevitably, some of the users come back and go, do you know what? Because of this business process, we cannot move this piece of data at this time. Or this piece of data must move at that particular time. So what we then do is we feed back into the scheduler these rules which says move this here or don't move this here. And and it reworks the schedule. Sometimes we have to go back to users and say, sorry, we were going to move you in beginning of April, we're not going to move you to the end of April, whatever it is, to make sure that we continue to allow the most efficient use of our time windows. And also, inevitably, because of the nature of this organisation, emergencies happen. Stuff happens somewhere, which means that suddenly we have to put a brake on a piece of data that was going to move. You know, this part of the army really can't have any interruptions at all. Can you move it back a couple of months? So we have to have that flexibility in the schedule to be able to move things around should we need to. So that scheduling job has an impact on everything. We may say to the source environment, we're going to move that piece of data out that source environment on this day, and the current incumbents who look after that say, no, sorry, you can't do that. So we have to think about the source, we have to think about the networks. Is the network down? Is it being upgraded? Are they testing video conferencing? Whatever it is, do we have the bandwidth to be able to do that? And as I said, the users as well. And that feeds also back into the tenant to make sure that we've provisioned and we're ready for the migrate. Now, everything that I've talked about up till now is the, if you like, the team sites data, it's the community data. We had an additional challenge, because we like having challenges on this program, that when we started to look at the environment that the users work in, a lot of those desktops were so old that they physically couldn't access Office 365. And they're in some pretty weird locations. Now, I'm not going to tell you some of the places that we've been to, but it's like, whoa. So we had to think about a desktop refresh at the same time as everything else. So what we have up in Erskine is a build facility for building out large-scale standard builds for servers and desktops and whatnot, which is also government certified. So what we do is we build out, suppose we're going to go to site X on a particular night. We know that there are 3,000 desktops in site X that need to be physically replaced. So the users are told, take off your little stickers and take off your pictures of your children and all that sort of stuff, which tend to go around screens, because that screen's going to disappear. The machines are built up in Erskine. They're put on the back of a lorry. The lorry turns up onto the site with people in workers' overalls, and their old machines are unplugged, the new machines are plugged in, and everything works. Fantastic. However, all of the data which they access through their old machine has to move at the same time. So we had to schedule the OneDrive for Business migrates at the same time as the physical desktops are loaded on. And we have to have the ability, the lorry gets stuck on the M1, so they can't actually do that work that night. We have to have a go, no-go button at about 6 o'clock in the evening, which says that migrate's happening or it's not happening, and we can stop those OneDrive for Business migrates dead in their tracks, ready for the next time that those guys are going to go onto that site. And again, the communication to the user, if that no-go decision is made, they're immediately sent a message to say, when you come in the morning, don't be surprised to find your old kit still sitting there. So again, lots and lots of communication, lots of thinking about the provisioning of the tenant as well. Huge amount of complexity, nothing to do with IT. This is all to do with scheduling and user experience and thinking about that way that could work. Any questions on any of that?
They're moving to a single tenant?
Yeah, I was going to ask that.
Yes. Yeah, single tenant, housed in the UK.
You say initially when you spent a lot of time actually deciding what data, finding out what was there, how long did that process take?
So we're still doing it, to be honest with you. So we did an initial one, which took about 3 or 4 months. So one of the things that we did was we took the output from the discovery and analysis tool, and we wrote a whole set of additional reporting around it to allow, effectively, the Ministry of Defence is effectively made up of 4 different organisations: Army, Navy, Air Force, and Central Command. So we did a whole set of additional reports to allow each of those organisations to figure out actually what the transformation is. one of the interesting things, and I'm glad I'm standing here actually, because cleanliness next to godliness, cleanse your data, right? And that's a good thing to do. So we were cleansing a lot of data in this, and those extra reports allowed the organisation to make the decisions about which data should be moved and which shouldn't. But we are still continuing to do that because in a project this sort of length, the source changes. You know, things are being created all the time. So we have to go back and revisit that. Any other question? Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
You talked about engaging early adopters in the design.
Yeah.
Did you also identify a training need?
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. So the TNA, the training needs analysis, was one of the really important things to do. There are, if you can imagine, I was in one of the early discussions with the organisation when some of the big top brass, you know, they have a lot of stuff on their shoulders and hats and stuff. It's a little intimidating when you're a room this sort of size full of that sort of stuff. But one of the guys said to me, I was talking about how you might change the way that you send emails, for example. And one of the guys said, young man, I have a lady that does that for me. So the training needs of that organisation are extreme. And so figuring out the way that the users were going to work and the needs of the various parts of the organisation was absolutely key. And they have an internal user adoption organisation that looks after the information architecture and the way that the data is accessed. And we work very closely with them, absolutely. Any other questions before I move on? Okay, so I was asked challenges and successes. Now we do a lot of migration programs over the years. I also, like Richard, go all the way back to SharePoint 2003. I am that old. And so this is it's a bit of a distillation of various thoughts and learnings and problems that we've hit over the years to give you an idea of the kinds of things that you need to consider, not the technology, but everything else around it. One of the things that we've discovered is that the SharePoint team is one of the only teams on a program of this sort of size that is likely to talk to everybody. So we will talk to Exchange, networks, users, Skype for Business, desktop. So we'll find out what's going on in the program. And it's not necessarily the case that everybody else will know that. So for example, the Exchange team, I have a colleague, a virtual colleague, he's not here today, and the Exchange and the SharePoint guys are always ribbing each other about, you know, it's email, how difficult can it be? You know, and they go, it's just files, how difficult can it be? So the Exchange guys tend to talk to IT a lot, but they don't that often talk to end users. They don't often talk to desktop refresh people. So the SharePoint people talk to everybody. So we sometimes get a view of other parts of the program that don't necessarily join up. So make sure that you work with all these different parts of the organizations, and when you find, I don't know how to turn the pointer on this thing, but the second bullet point, when you find out about something that you think is going to cause a problem, stand up, be the owner of the problem. However, don't always give way. Sometimes you're going to have to say to Exchange, sorry, you can't migrate that day. It's important that we migrate that day. Or we need additional bandwidth for this reason, whatever it is. So be the ambassador, be the mediator, but also guard your own plan. There's a lot of worry in the organizations that manage the source environments. There's a lot of fear. If you're moving away from SharePoint 2007, they've got a group of people who've been looking after those environments for years, and they will have, the incumbent team will be sensitive. They will be worried that they're going to lose their jobs, or they're going to have to go through a lot of retraining or something like that. So don't just go in to a data center and go, right, we're here to migrate all this stuff and it's all going to be switched off, and isn't it going to be fantastic in the new environment? Because the incumbent teams will be worried about the changes and what it means to them. So be sensitive. Also, the incumbents will have a whole set of processes and procedures which may not even be documented because they've been running for so many years. They have things which they know that must be followed. We talked long and hard to the MOD when we wanted to install the DocAve software into the MOS environments. What are the processes we have to follow to allow us to actually install this software on the machines? And they gave us all the processes and procedures, and we built it into our project plan, and life was great. Then we turned up to one of the data centers, and the incumbent said, well, that process is completely wrong. This is how we do it in this data center. So you have to have the flexibility to be able to change the way that you work with all the different incumbents and all the different places that this stuff is installed. It's worth pointing out that we're doing this program fixed price. So we've told the MOD 2 years ago, this is how long it's going to take and this is how much it's going to cost. And if it's badly wrong, well, I did a lot of the pricing, so if it's really badly wrong, I wouldn't be here talking to you. But if it's badly wrong, we have to absorb that. It's one of the things that we do. And one of the risks is this lack of knowledge of the process in the source. So you have to consider that. Office 365, bless it, it's a fantastic platform, but it changes regularly. So the evergreening of Office 365 itself, on a program of this size and scale, can cause problems. You need to be aware of what's coming down the line. You need to be aware of the user impact and the user experience. Users that start using SharePoint Online at the beginning of this program will see a completely different experience. The removal of the ribbon is a great example in document libraries. So the people who started to use this at the beginning had the ribbon, and suddenly it disappeared. So you have to be aware that Microsoft are going to regularly produce new functionality, and they're also going to deprecate functionality. So be aware of that as well. One of the things that we did, just checking to see if that's another note. No, one of the things that we did during this program is the introduction of high-speed migrate. Actually happened during this program. So we were originally using the CSOM interface to move the data from one place to another. High-speed migrate was introduced. The client, the end client, hadn't bought any Azure Blob Storage. Didn't need it. High-speed migrate is a lot faster than the CSOM migrate. So we worked with AvePoint as they brought out the software to support that. We worked with the IT departments to say, okay, we're going to move this whole project away from CSOM migrate to high-speed migrate because we can do things a lot faster. Guess what? It means the schedule changes. So we had to go back to the end users and say, is that okay? But we also had to work with the MOD to say, actually, how quickly are you going to be able to get this Azure Blob Storage for us to be able to use HSM? And that took a lot longer than we expected, a lot longer, because it had to go through their procurement process. Somebody had to sign it off with a lot of braid and all that thing. What is this Azure malarkey? I don't understand what I'm buying. Come in and talk to me, explain why I'm spending a lot of money with Microsoft when you've told me I've spent all the money that I need to spend. So be aware of these changes that happen in the target. Also, it's very easy for a program of this size and a program of this complexity to fall into silos. The Exchange team are doing their bit, the Skype for Business team are doing their bit, the desktop team are doing their bit. It's really important that you work as a program, all the streams working together, making sure that all the challenges are overcome, making sure that all the streams know what all the challenges are. Don't work as silos. Have regular program team meetings. Use Skype for Business. It's a fantastic tool. Video conferencing is it changes the way that we work. So regularly have those, not only internally, but also with all the other suppliers, also with the end client. Make sure you have these regular program updates. And make sure that the client knows, or you are the client, so make sure you yourself know that an organization like mine doesn't just come in and do it to you. Right? You say, can you migrate all my stuff for me? Well, actually, the first answer is no, we're transforming. We're not migrating. But we're going to do things with you. We can't do them to you. Anybody a Star Wars fan in here? You remember that scene with Darth Vader when he goes, I am your father, and Luke goes, no! What you don't want is a no moment. And if you have the knowledge up front and you work with people, you won't have that no moment. Luke would have known from the first episode that Darth Vader was his father. So work with people, work with the organisations, don't work against them. Yeah? Does that make sense? That's all I wanted to say. Those are my contact details. Please feel free to email me. I'm going to be around the rest of the day. I'm certainly going to go to the pub for a pint. I think that in this heat we all deserve one of those. But any questions immediately? We've got a few minutes before. Yeah.
Hi. You talked about the challenge of the end product, Office 365, changing during the course of the project. Do you face a similar challenge in the source changing during the course of the project? How do you deal with that?
That's an interesting question. For the SharePoint side, no, because it's SharePoint 2007, so that ain't going to change, right? There are no service packs coming out. There's nothing. It may that environment may change if the original supplier wants to change the way that they manage the platform. So you need to understand the process and the procedures.
I really meant in terms of discovery, so the data.
Right.
Yeah.
So the discovery, we did an initial big discovery at the beginning of the program, as I said, to really understand what was out there in big chunks of data. As the platform is being used, as the program goes on, basically we do smaller rediscoveries and reanalysis so that we understand what's changing in that environment as we go through. It's definitely a case that you need to plan that. Yeah. Anybody else? Yeah.
Just interested in how different the end result is from what they thought they were going to get at the beginning.
Yeah, that's a good question. An organisation of this sort of size, you don't really know what people think they're going to get at the end, because if you like, the usability people and the IT people have got a very clear idea. And this is a command-based system, so a lot of users are told, this is what's going to happen. You know, live with it. Resistance is futile. Sorry, another Star Trek one there. It's impossible to know what the people on the ground thought that they were going to get. They did some really good communication. So the current environment is called DIIF, Defence Infrastructure. I forgot what DII stands for. But the new system is called ModNet. And there was a lot of communication in all the different bases. Coming soon, ModNet. And there was we did some road shows. We went out and demonstrated some of the product and some of the functionality early on to some of the big sites. So Main Building, Abbey Wood, Corsham, places like that. The smaller sites, that's a lot more difficult to do for. So, I mean, if you think about some of the RAF bases up in the Orkneys and places like that, that's quite difficult to get to. So it had to be a combination of face-to-face and, if you like, remote communication. So what those guys thought, to be honest with you, I have no idea. Anything else? That's a really interesting question, because some of the organisations that we've done these sorts of migrations for, people like the University of the West of England, were really cooperative and really collaborative with their staff and with their central departments. So we did a lot of workshops and a lot of roadshows. There were no surprises. With this sort of organisation, where it is, as I said, command and control, people just get what they're given. So it depends on the organisation. Any other questions? Right, great. Well, thank you for listening.